Start talking, we're live.
Perfect.
It's because it's your laptop now.
Sorry.
I could totally regret this thing. It's what you get for not being here in person.
That's
is
it.
possibly a dud stream.
Hey, look, you can hand signals,
Interpretive dance.
That's it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2nd March meetup for Melb.net. And it's on a Friday night. What an amazing turnout. Thanks you all for being here. You got a clicker.
To go to the next slide.
No, down to go to the next slide.
Down.
Down. Oh, there we go. I want to turn it the other way around. So yes, thanks for joining. We already have 2 amazing speakers. Sponsors. 1 speaker with 2 talks as well. But for Melb.net, we're also always looking for partners or sponsors to help out. It's hard work. There's a lot of people involved usually. So if you're keen to get involved, even just as a helper, to get everything going or to host. So Lachlan here is co-hosting with me tonight. So yeah, just come and have a chat with us. Upside down.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm William. There you go.
That was quick. Microsoft MVP, newly minted for this year. Well done. Hi, everyone. 2 weeks ago. Great job. Round of applause as well. Great job.
You got to go that way to be in camera.
Oh, I have to come to the middle. Sorry. I was hiding over there. And where's the clicker? There we go. Now, up to go to the next one or down?
Down to go to the
down
next
to go to the next. It's not left and right to go between slides. Very weird. My name's Lachlan Barclay. I'm what am I now? Principal engineer at a company called Rome to Rio travel website, which is Google Maps on steroids. Is the quickest way to explain it. So this is my first time helping host. Thank you, Will, giving me the opportunity. So I'll probably say lots of things wrong and get everything wrong, but that's cool. That's how you learn. So to start with, we'll do the acknowledgement of country. We're holding this meeting based in and around Melbourne. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Down, there we go. We have a code of conduct, .netfoundation.org/about/code of conduct. Basically, don't be a jerk. We record all of the talks. We're streaming right now on YouTube and LinkedIn.
And 2 YouTube channels.
2 YouTube channels.
From George and Melb.net. And LinkedIn, yeah.
And LinkedIn. So the camera's over there. So everyone turn around, wave at the camera, wave at the stream. Hey, everyone, yay! Sucks you're not here. Yeah, turn up next time. That's really good fun. If you have questions, please raise your hand or post in the chat. Do you want questions during your talk?
I'm fine to take questions live and ignore them.
Fine to take questions live but ignore them. Fair enough. Yeah, don't. Yeah. But we will have a Q&A afterwards, I believe.
And I can continue to ignore questions.
Continue to ignore questions. Yes. So.
Yeah. Don't give it away.
Okay. I've just said we're on YouTube. We're streaming right now. There's the link if you want to check it out. Hopefully everything is good. Audio and yeah, all that was a lot of fun trying to get it working 5 minutes ago. We do have swag. We have these wonderful t-shirts, Melb.net. If you want to show you're an awesome Melbourne.net person, there's the shop. And who's going to DDD tomorrow? Put your hand up. Not that many people. Only a few people. It sells out really, really quick. It's an awesome conference. I've gone lots of times, spoken at it a bunch of times. It's really, really good. So yeah, try next time to get tickets. I definitely recommend it. Super cheap. And it's all done by fellow devs who are learning how to present for the first time as well, which is really good. So there's often really interesting talks from people who are, learning how to speak. So they're kind of got new ideas. It's really good fun.
Yes.
That's
So we're always here to try and connect everyone. So someone that's looking for work or has work on offer, right? So you can come and talk to us. We also have Ed from Circuit IT, who's one of our sponsors tonight. And I think Ed would like to, have a clap. Yay! So we just want to give Ed, they're sponsoring all our swag tonight, which is great. Just say a few words about Circuit.
I'll be really brief. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming tonight. Great turnout. What a turnout on a Friday. Look, if you're looking for work, I'm GM at Circuit Recruitment. We're a boutique agency. We operate across Australia and New Zealand. We've been around for 13 years and we recruit for startups, SMEs and multinationals. I probably won't bore you with any other details, but I'm here tonight with Sean, who works in my team. He's recently joined us. So please come and have a chat with us throughout the night or at the end of the evening if you're interested in talking about your career, trends in the market, or if you have any family perhaps looking for work, we'd love to help you. But thanks to Will and Penny and letting us be part of this because it's a great meetup. And again, what a turnout for a Friday. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much. So we have Microsoft sponsoring our venue. So thanks all the Microsoft guys. And we have Circuit, which we just heard from Ed, and Pinch. So Ben Cole, he happily paid for all the food and drinks tonight. So big shout out to Ben. He couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately, but maybe next time. So we have Aaron coming up with a talk about generative AI for the .NET developer. And then we have a second talk by Aaron talking about something very important, burnout. So I won't spoil anything for that one, but I think I'm looking forward to that one as well. So all yours, Aaron. Take it away, man.
Awesome. Now we've got to do switch all the
musical
things
cables.
over.
And we
Talk amongst yourselves.
Good to go.
All right, now it's also where we hope like the stream is all working and all that kind of stuff. And I'm gonna wait till I get a thumbs up from the people that are the producers down the back of the room. I can see he's fiddling with the camera, so we're gonna assume that we're all good.
Thanks for having me here. I'm pretty excited to be here. Tonight we're going to be talking about generative AI for .NET development. So hopefully you're ready to learn some stuff. My name is Aaron Powell, and I'm a principal cloud advocate on Azure Advocacy at Microsoft. I've been doing web dev for nearly 20 years, and for the past 18 months, I've been looking more. If you want to connect with me, you will find my social media and other links on the slide.
Thanks, AI Aaron. I thought that was a perfect way to start an AI talk. Because realistically, every time I give an AI talk, the first question that comes up is, well, can't AI just do it? Well, I guess I'm kind of out of a job now, right? I just introduced myself, and that was a voice model trained on my voice. So it kind of sounds like me. It's not perfect, the pitch and tone and speaking speed and stuff like that, and not quite the way that I would do it. But there's ways that we can tune it, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that as well. Plus a whole bunch of other stuff around AI. But this is a bit of an introductory talk, so we're going to cover off some of the getting started things. But before we kind of dive into slides and theory and all that sort of stuff, I thought I would start with a demo, because understanding how this fits into how this actually works, I think is more interesting initially than just 30 slides about AI. So I've got an application here that I've built. Let me zoom that in a touch. So this is an application, and the idea is maybe I'm a bit time poor. I want to learn something new. Podcasts are a great way to learn stuff, but there's how do I find the right podcast for the things that I might be interested in? So I built this little application, and I can say, I want to learn about retro gaming and emulation. And this has been trained on Scott Houseman's podcast. There's close to 1,000 episodes in that. So finding the episodes that are going to be particularly interesting for this topic, well, that's kind of difficult. So instead, I've asked the question, what can I learn about that? And it's come back with an answer, which my AI can read back. Oh, that's right. I've actually just muted all the audio in my browser, so that's not playing, because we get really weird reverb from that. But trust me, when that is actually, it's reading out that answer of like retro gaming and emulation or popular topics and and then what it's done is it's given me a link to some episodes that might be of interest. So this one about FPGA powered future with Jose, and it's also said that the relevance of this to the question that I asked was 0.884, so it's like 84% relevant to what I'm actually interested in. There's the topics that it found that was a retro gaming topic. Then we've got more about, say, like MAME emulators and so on and so forth. These have other speakers identified and things like that. Now, what's interesting in looking at an RSS feed for a podcast, which is how we get them into podcast applications, is stuff like speaker, topics. Those aren't in metadata that goes into an RSS feed. In fact, I've actually pulled this out using AI. Out of the topic, and then I've generated a summary of the episode as well using our large language models. That's the kind of thing that we can build, and that's fully built in .NET. It's a .NET server, Blazor front-end application. And it's building those kinds of applications that I want to talk about tonight. So, as I said, we're going to be covering generative AI and kind of start from sort of some of the fundamentals. And when it comes to the fundamentals, this is the large language model. That's the thing that underpins a generative AI application. So large language models like the GPT models from OpenAI, Llama from Meta, and then the variety of other ones that have popped up over the past, I don't know, like 24 hours. I feel like there's a new LLM that gets released almost every single day. Now, these models are trained on large volumes of natural language, text from books, web pages, articles, social media posts, and kind of everything in between. They're ingested by these models to build up its base data set. And because it's trained on the way natural language is produced, so written word and things like that, it understands the constructs of natural language, which is why we can interact with it using natural language. You don't have to try and trick it into like, what's the right way to structure a search query like you do with a traditional search engine. With these models then, we start off with our prompt and we give it a prompt, and then it's going to give us some kind of a completion. That completion is going to be in the form of a token, or it's going to be a series of tokens, and it's going to do that in a sliding window pattern, and we'll keep getting more and more tokens based off of the context of what it's been provided with. So let's take this initial starting prompt of once upon a time. We give that across to, say, GPT-3.5, and then that's going to come back with something like, in a quaint village nestled between rolling hills and meandering streams, da-da-da-da. Now, the reason it would come back with this is because, well, once upon a time is a fairly common starting point to like an English language folktale, nursery rhyme, those kinds of text. So a logical completion from that. So it's predicted that the next likely set of tokens would be in a quaint village, so on and so forth. At the end of the day, it's just predicting what is the next token to give you back. It's really just fancy autocomplete. Like that's what we've spent like the last 18 months getting really excited about is autocomplete engines, like we have in our phones, just slightly better, arguably at least. So the basic flow of it is it's going to start with our natural language input. It's going to turn it into a series of tokens. That's that colorized chunks up there. Those tokens are going to be turned into numbers. Those numbers are given across to our model. A probability distribution algorithm is going to be executed against that to work out what is the next token, and it's going to decode that back into natural language and return that as an output. Or to put it slightly more simply, we start with n number of tokens in, and we get one token out. It always will return one token. Now, it will build on that, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But I also keep saying the word token, like everyone in the room knows what a token is, right? Like we know what tokens are, so we just skip over the next couple of slides. Tokens are what we get with models. That's the thing that we work with. Now, you might be mistaken in thinking that a token is a word. A token is not a word. I mean, it might be a word. It's also not a single character, although it might be a single character. Phrase here, we need to stop anthropomorphizing ChatGPT. Now, this is broken down into 11 tokens from 43 characters, and there is less than 11 words. There is 9 words. No, less than 9 words. 6 words, yeah. I can't see my speaker notes because of the way we're screen sharing. But what we'll notice here is words like we, need to, and stop, those are tokens in and of themselves. That's what the colorized sections represent, is individual tokens. But you also see that words like need, to, and stop have a white space character in front of them, and that's part of the token because the white space is important for the word need, so it doesn't get appended onto the thing that precedes it. A word like anthropomorphizing, And I've given this talk a lot, and you would not believe the number of times I had to practice saying the word anthropomorphizing to get it right every time. And I get it like 60% of the time, every time. But that is broken down into 3 tokens. It's because the word anthropomorphizing is not particularly common in the English language, but sections of it are. IZING, and you can clearly tell this was done by, like, the original slide was written by an American colleague of mine. IZING is a common suffix to a variety of words. So that's why it is a token in and of itself, whereas the other parts are then appended to it, and then it can predict, well, it might predict that IZING is the completion to anthropomorph. Same with chat and G and P and T, and then the full stop. If you want to actually see a tokenizer in action, you can go to platform.openai.com/tokenizer, chuck in a bit of text and see what that generates and see how something gets broken down to tokens. I'm only going to cover English language here because I only speak English. I have seen how it works with other languages, and it's very different. One of my colleagues was showing me Japanese today, and the Japanese word for cat, or the Japanese character for cat, is actually 3 tokens, according to the OpenAI tokenizer, or tick token, which is what they use. Okay, so it uses these tokens, it gets these tokens back, and it uses an expanding window pattern to build out our completion. So it might receive the initial context, or the starting prompt of "we need to," and then it predicts that the next word is "stop." And then based off of that new amount of context it's got, including the word "stop," it might predict anthrop, morph, izing, so on and so forth. And by continuing to build on top of it, it will keep expanding out until it reaches whatever stop condition you define for it. Number of tokens you want back, or any other of the stop conditions that you might provide. Token count is the most common stop condition people use. So this is a visualization of the probability distribution algorithm that a model is going to work with. So we'll see that it comes back with, so we started with our n number of tokens in, we need to stop. And then it has this, that big sliding window of potential tokens that it can use. And they're going to have a weight against them to how likely that token is to be the next completion token that it needs to get. And then based off of some parameters that you give it, it will, that's how you influence what it's going to pick out of that bucket of potential tokens to get your 1 token out. So you might be wondering, like, is this deterministic? The short answer to that is no. Losing a slide there. So it's not deterministic because the model is just going to use the context that it's been provided with to try and predict what it can come back with. And there's ways that we can control the deterministic nature of that. And that is using 2 parameters to, and this is more specific to an OpenAI model. Like Llama and things like that have different ways that you can control the deterministic nature of it. But the 2 main things are going to be temperature and p-top, or top p, depending on which SDK you're looking at. Temperature, so both these work at a scale of 0 to 1. And temperature is used to determine the to modify the creativity or the randomness that that you have within inside of the model. So a temperature closer to 0 is going to be very deterministic in the results that it's going to get. It's almost going to be clinical in the way that it gives you back an answer. It's very to the point. It doesn't contain a lot of sort of fluff words that we might have when we're talking to someone. Like as humans, we tend to include words that are useful in the way that we communicate, but they don't provide a lot of value to the actual answer that you're trying to give. A model with a temperature of 0 is going to be less likely to do that. But push it to 1 and you get things that are really creative, because it's going to just, like its potential token map is huge. So it's just going to be like, that one over there, that sounds fun. And it also results in something that looks a lot more human in its outputs. Things like ChatGPT, they use about a 0.7 as their response, as their temperature. And that's why it feels so natural in the way that you're communicating with it. P-top is controlling the amount of possible tokens that the model can select from in its probability algorithm. So if we push this again closer to 1, so like, closer to 0, say 0.1, it's only going to take the top 10% of potential tokens and then select from that. Push it to, say, 0.5 or further, and you're going to have a really large pile of tokens for it to select from. And then, so that, again, influences randomness and creativity. And this brings us on to the topic of prompt engineering. Now, prompt engineering is more than just kind of a hype word from like a recruitment perspective, because there is actually a lot of skill involved in being able to produce good prompts to get the outputs that you're looking for in an application. There's kind of three main ways that you can do prompting in an application. We can give it an instruction of something to do. I want you to convert this code from Python to C#. We're very explicit in what we want it to do. We're giving it clear parameters of what we're trying to achieve and instructing it to give us an outcome based off of that. We can ask it to complete something for us. This is the kind of thing you would see with, say, GitHub Copilot. That's code completion, and it's going to give us that completion out. Lastly, we can ask an open-ended question, and then based off of the training data the model has, it can attempt to answer that. So in the case of the Hanselbot that I had there before, it will attempt to use the information in the descriptions of 950 or something podcasts when I generated that index. It's going to attempt to determine what is the answer based off of those descriptions, not just like generalized knowledge that it has within inside of itself. So when it comes to building a good prompt, we want to avoid having assumptions built into it. Let's say that first instructional prompt. Translate this code from Python. But to what? If I don't tell it I want C#, it's going to determine, or it's going to pick a language to give the completion based off of what it has the most weighting in. And that's probably going to be JavaScript, because there's a lot more JavaScript code that is out there in open source repos that is what has been indexed for these models than there is, say, C# or Rust or something like that. So you're more likely to get JavaScript. But I know my code base is C#, and if I don't give it that instruction, though, it's not going to know that. Have the problems as small as possible, break them down into small pieces, because the more possible things that you want the model to do in a single prompt, the more possible tokens it's going to have, and as a result, the less deterministic it can be in the way that it gives you an outcome. And provide as much context as you can around what you're attempting to achieve. The more context you give to the prompt, the more you can constrain the box that the model is going to work with inside of. And that comes on to the types of prompts that we've got. There's two main prompts that we work with. We've got the system prompt and the user prompt. The system prompt is how we control the, for lack of a better description, personality. It feels really weird saying personality because, well, they're not human. The model is not a brain. But it's the kind of thing that it's very difficult to not humanize it. So we give it our personality through a system prompt. Say, you're an AI assistant that helps people find information and responds in rhyme. If a user asks a question you don't know the answer to, say so. So we give that as a system prompt, set it up as its personality, and then a user comes in with the prompt and it says, so the user prompt is the one that comes in from the consumer of your application. They're trying to achieve something. And the user has said, what can you tell about me, John Doe? And then the assistant might come back, or the model might come back with, dear John, I'm sorry to say, I don't have info on you today. I'm just an AI with knowledge of my brain, but without your input, I can't explain. So please tell me more about what you seek, and I'll do my best to give you answers unique. So there's two things that have happened as a result of that system prompt. It's responded in a rhyme, as we can see by the rhyming words on pairs of lines. But we've also said, if the user asks a question you don't know the answer to, say so. And the model has done that. It has said that it doesn't know how to answer the question of what can you tell about me. It does that in rhyme, though. And it's so you can see how like we've put that box around the model. We've given it some constraints through that system prompt. Okay, so let's talk about text, because text has become the most common way that we work with these models at the moment. Might not look as pretty as using like an image generator or something like that, like DALL-E, but text models are really common use cases, and this is a non-exhaustive list of them. A lot of them you're probably familiar with and you use in day-to-day. So things like code generation, GitHub Copilot, and the other styles of tools that work in that space. I basically can't code without Copilot anymore, and like if it doesn't give me a completion, I just kind of sit there with my finger on the tab key, waiting. There we go. Okay, now I can write code again. Just keep hitting tab until it all goes away. Summarization. I've got access to M365 Copilot like in my email, so I don't have to like read my emails anymore. Summarize, or like I didn't watch a team meeting because half my team's in the US. Summarize. It's great. It makes my life so much more efficient. But these are really common use cases, like summarize documents, semantic searching. The Hanselbot that we had there is an example of semantic searching. We gave it a bunch of information. We asked it a question and tried to semantically find answers inside of that data set of potential podcast episodes. All right, so we'll jump into a demo in a moment, but just tips with prompt engineering for text is define that persona up front, and where possible, add a chat history into what's been happening, so that you have that continuation of what the user has asked. They don't have to keep repeating themselves. Provide examples or constraints around the model that you're working with. We call this meta grounding. And lastly, put guardrails in place. No one wants to be that next AI assistant that's popped up on tech media because someone's figured out how to turn it into just like Chat GPT, or they've managed to game the assistant. There was one a couple of weeks ago, an airline that has got taken to court because the assistant was giving back information, and they have to now honor what it was. They were getting sued because people wanted it to honor what the assistant was saying, even though they worked out how to kind of break the rules the assistant had built into it. You don't want to be that next company that appears there. All right, so let's have a look at how we can do some text model stuff. And I'm going to jump over here, and in the essence of time, I'm not going to live code this. Instead, I'm going to bring up some code that I wrote earlier with LinkPad. All right, wait, do we want C# or F#? Oh, ouch. I'm like, there's like dozens of us that care about F#, okay? All right, so what I've got here is a basic example of using a streaming chat completion API. So streaming is used to get, it will return like one token at a time, and we can do something at that token. We keep polling for more tokens until we hit the stop condition. I'm using Azure OpenAI service, using the Azure AI.OpenAI. Was it Azure? Yeah, Azure AI.OpenAI. No, Azure OpenAI. The .NET SDK for it from Azure. This SDK also works with OpenAI, not just Azure OpenAI. So if you you can swap between those by just instead of providing a key and an endpoint, you just provide it with your OpenAI key. And it's literally all you got to change to move from OpenAI to Azure OpenAI and back and forth. So we create our OpenAI client. I've generated a prompt that said, what are the 3 top features of the most recent .NET release? I've given that across as a chat user message. So this is obviously the message that's coming in from the user. And then I'm awaiting a chat completion streaming result to come back. And then we get a iasync enumerable that I can iterate over. And let's hit F5 and let's see what that does. All right. So go and a little bit small at the bottom. Run that again. All right. So that was actually really fast. Kind of doesn't really show the kind of value of streaming because, well, it was really, really fast in the way that it came back. So instead, let's just go await task.delay 100. Let's just put like a 100 millisecond delay in there. Import namespace. Just run that again. So this is what happens when we're doing streaming. As you can see, we're getting kind of like one token at a time. But you also know there's a problem. It's referred to C#9 as the most recent language, which is not correct. It's C#12. Is that what we're up to? I forget. That's we're at least 11, right? Yeah. 12 might be the preview one, yeah. It hasn't referred to a specific .NET version, but it's talked about things like .NET MAUI, which that wasn't new in the most recent .NET release. Interestingly enough, this is actually talking about .NET 5, because this is using a GPT-3.5 model, which had its training data cut off in September of 2021. So this is actually quite out of date. Well, what do we want to address that? We want to improve the knowledge of our model. And that's what we can do with our system message. So our system message isn't just about personality, but it's also where we can provide context. So in this case, I've created a chat request system message as the first in the chat history. And I've said that the most recent version of .NET is .NET 8, which is the most recent stable version. Preview 9, .NET 9 Preview 1 is out, if anyone wants to play with that. But it says released in 2023, and then gives some information about that. So cloud native applications, AI, so on and so forth. let's run that again, and let's see what we get back this time. Oops, I realized that I have not copied across some where my keys are, because, guess what I did today? Rewrite my demos. That's what you do. All right. So now it's been a bit more explicit. It said the most recent release of .NET is .NET 8, performance improvements, cloud native applications, and AI integration, because that's the information that we gave it. We grounded the interactions that we're having with the model. We haven't retrained the model. So if I was to delete that information there, it would forget it because we don't have that there. We're providing it as context. So we're adding some additional context to the start of that sliding window that is then generating completions against. And that's really all you have to do to make a model more contextualized around a particular problem space. And it's like 5 lines of code to use a model in .NET, which I think is pretty cool. All right, I want to talk briefly about numbers because computers don't talk in, and models in particular, they don't talk in text. We interact with them in text, but internally they don't use text, they use numbers. In particular, they use embeddings. Embeddings are a numerical representation of the words and the concepts that those words represent in a prompt that is being given. So something like today we are going to learn about Azure AI Studio. Like that's a prompt, and then we give that to an ADA model from OpenAI, and there are a bunch of local text embedding models, but I'll talk about ADA because that's the one I'm most familiar with. ADA will generate you a vector, which is an array of float values. It's a vector of 1,536 values. And we use this to model the relationships semantically of bits of text or vectors in multidimensional space. In fact, we model this in 1,536 dimensions, which I can't visualize in my head, so I can't draw a diagram of that. If anyone can, you're probably a much better mathematician than I am. But with these vectors, because we then store them in a vector database, such as Postgres with the PG vector extension, Azure AI Search, Quadrant, and then there's a variety of other ones out there, a bunch of open source ones that have started popping up. And these databases are optimized to working with these vectors and perform semantic evaluations of information against other vectors at a database level rather than at application level. Most commonly, we're using something like the cosine similarity function to do that similarity test. Doing that at the database level, you actually generate an index, so it's super quick. And I do have an example of how that actually works and what that looks like in the database, but it's not a particularly interesting demo. So come to me afterwards, and I can show you that. But for the essence of time, let's move on and talk about custom logic. Because while it's great to be able to just talk with these models and ask them questions, we want to use them as a tool in kind of applications that we're building beyond just a autocomplete. One of the most useful features that OpenAI released, I think it was last year when they released it. I don't think it was the year before. It came out in GPT 3.5 Turbo model 613, I think it was. So I think that was the middle of last year. It's this idea of OpenAI functions. So a function is, we give it a JSON payload, which is the structure of a thing that we want it to be able to identify with inside of our prompt. So in this case, I've got a function, it's called search hotels. We give it a description, and the description is actually a prompt in and of itself. So you put information into that to help the model understand what to do. And then we give it some parameters, things for it to look for inside of the prompt. So we want a location and we want a max price. We can give them descriptions. Again, those are prompts. We provide this with our meta prompt or our system prompt. And then the user comes in and asks a question of hotel with private beach, max cost 300 euros in Delmaris. Now, if we were to not use an OpenAI function, this would come back with a completion of a hotel that you could be looking for in Delmaris is yada, 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 which might be fine to return to an end user. But what if we want to perform a search against our database to then give back specific results because we're working at a travel agency? Well, we want that as something structured that we can pass. In this case, an OpenAI function will then give us a JSON payload back. It gives us the JSON payload that we've got there on the far side of the screen from me, or the near side, depending on which side of the room you're sitting on, where it says it has the location, as we said, as a parameter, Delmaris, and a max price of 300, because that's the things that we told it to look for. Now we can then deserialize that JSON within our side of our application, extract those values, perform a SQL query, hit a backend API, or whatever the case may be. Now it's important to note that OpenAI functions aren't executing functions on our system for us. We're not exposing our application to the LLM. We are getting information back from the LLM that we can then perform a call with inside of our application, or we can operate against within inside of our application. So let's have a look at an example of a function, and a function that I actually use inside of that HanselBot demo. Here's the C# version. It's actually written in F#. Haha, you thought you were getting away from it. You might end up with F# code later, depending on how we're going with time. But what I've done here is it's very similar to the text completions that we're working with. I'm going to have to fix those first 2 lines of code because they are incorrect. They're using the util get password, not the environment variable. But we create a chat completion function definition tool. That's a mouthful and a half. We give it the stuff that we saw with inside of that JSON payload, because this one is, but for this one, I'm using it to extract information from the podcast episode description. I want to do a summary of the episode. I want the topics from the episode, and I want the speakers, excluding Scott Hanselman, because it's Hanselman's podcast. So we kind of expect Scott is going to have been someone who has worked, who is a speaker in there. It's a little bit clunky how we have to define these. We have to turn it into JSON. So we use this binary data from object as JSON, which I hope that we get a better API at some point, because that's not ideal. Tools like Semantic Kernel do have a slightly nicer way of doing it, but I wanted to keep this very raw at the OpenAI standpoint. Next, we create our chat completion options. I'm giving it 2 user messages about 2 different podcast episodes, and then I provide it with a collection of tools that I want it to be using. So the tools are the functions that can be executed. In this case, I've only got one, which is the extract info function. And then I'm going to use the get chat completions async API. I'm not using a streaming completion because there's no point streaming back something that would be I want as JSON, because I don't want to have to then just build the string myself. I may as well wait for the entire response from the model and get that back as a single JSON payload. And then I'm just iterating over this, over the results we get back. So we get back multiple choices. So these are the things that the model has generated for us. I'm just going to grab the first one, have a look to see if that is a tool call. So the result, so the reason, if the reason that we got a response back was because a tool, or our function in this case, was executed, I'm going to then convert that into a tool call. I'm then going to extract the information from that, deserialize as JSON, and then just dump this back out. Let's run that, realize that I didn't update my code. It's going to fail. So we'll just paste things back in, hit F5, give that a moment to run. All right, so let's just zoom in again. Now, we'll see that, let's just scroll to, okay. So we'll see that we got 2 tool responses because we had 2 user messages in there. The first one in this episode of Handsome Minutes, Scott talks to Jose, so on and so forth. And we get kind of like a very, it's similar, but it's sort of rephrased slightly in how it's come back in that summary. We'll see the topics it's detected, things like retro gaming, FPGA development, classic arcade games, so on and so forth. And the speaker was Jose, because, well, I didn't tell it anywhere inside of that block of text that Jose was the speaker, but it understands what a name is in terms of like how language could look. So it's figured that Jose is probably a likely person to be extracted from there. Same with Quincy. Quincy was detected as a speaker, as well as things like Free Code Camp, so on and so forth. But you will also notice that Quincy was detected as a topic inside of their session. So while this has done a good job of giving us some information, we're probably still going to do some sanitizing of that at our own end. Maybe like remove items that are in the speaker collection that are also in the topics, and so on and so forth. But you can see how I could then pass that across to a backend database, perform a call, and get some results from it. All right, speech. We heard AI Aaron at the start. But I'll talk a bit about speech in general. So we've got 2 forms of speech with AI models. We've got speech in, where so speech to text, so live transcriptions, live translations, that kind of stuff. And with the Whisper models, we can do something like this.
medium-sized camp is characterized by solid black spots and streaks on its coat.
Now, anyone that's been to a session or like has watched live transcriptions or computer-generated transcriptions from audio, turn on captioning in YouTube, and they're generally pretty good, but complex words like Lepartus peridalis, like that's a complex word, or complex set of words, and the fact that it can get with that level of accuracy is pretty impressive, because that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, and that's sort of the difference that we get out of these large language model based speech to text compared to things we've had in the past. Or like anyone that's been to a tech talk and see the word SQL get translated live by machine computer translations, that's always fun. SQL. But so we can do that. We can take audio in, turn that into text. Then obviously we've got speech out. In this case, we take the phrase like, to best meet your needs, I would recommend the following.
I would recommend the following.
And again, that's a voice model that's been trained on me. So the way that I've done that, and text to speech, again, it's not something that is necessarily new. We've had TTS models for a long time. Like I've got a bunch of Google Homes in my house, and whenever the washing machine finishes, I do a lot of smart home stuff. When the washing machine finishes, it's broadcast in the house in like the Google voice of like washing complete. I'm actually trying to integrate my my AI voice model so that my voice can be like, the washing is complete, and just really like weird my family out, or make it even weirder when we've got a house sitter and we're away. We're watching you. But the way that we can do these custom voice models is using the custom neural voice feature. So this is something I've done with Azure. So the first thing with that, you select the voice talents, such as myself, and then you want to train it based off of audio. We use utterances. They're about 6-word phrases. The one in this slide I did off 34 utterances. I just sat at my computer and just read back these phrases. So it's very static because it's a 6-word phrase read in isolation. It then trained a model for about an hour, and it was, I'd say about 75%. It would probably fool enough people that was me, that I could probably start a scam ring if I really needed to. Oh wait, we're recording this, aren't we? Damn it. There is also a pro version of custom neural voice in Azure where you can upload a larger voice model. You've got to do a minimum of 300 utterances. Yes, JK.
Just a quick one. This is now also being used against scams to waste the time.
Oh, excellent. Using custom voice models back at scammers. That's a good idea. Yeah, so as I was saying, the pro version that I used at the start to introduce myself, you have to upload a minimum of 300 utterances, or you can upload like a raw audio file and have it try and extract that from it. I uploaded about 90 minutes of me giving presentations at a variety of different virtual events and stuff like that. And I had local recordings. I extracted the audio and then just dumped it in. I didn't give it a transcript or anything. When you're doing utterances through the training that it has in the Azure portal, you have to provide it provides you with the text so it knows what you're doing. This time I just gave it 90 minutes of Aaron speaking, and it generated about 700 utterances from that. So then it trained for 22 hours and gave me a voice model that I would say is probably about 90%. We can then combine that with the speech synthesis markup language, or SSML. Again, that was a fun one to practice and say like really fast multiple times in a talk is speech synthesis markup language. I stumbled over that a few times. But you can use that to control things like pitch and tone and speaking rate and things like that. Played a little bit around with that. And yeah, like you can put pauses in there, because one thing the model doesn't understand is when to put a pause in. The other thing, because I've played around with some of this audio a bit, I can actually hear myself take breaths in the AI model, because that was in the training audio that I provided it. It's just like, that's freaky. So let's have a look at the .NET required for working with speech. This should work. This one. So this is using a different SDK. It's using the speech SDK. I'd have to look at my NuGet page to know exactly which one it is. Come find me afterwards. You want to know the exact SDK. But here we give it our access to our Azure resource, where it is, and the name of the voice model that we're going to be using. So this is a a local neural version of Aaron. We create our speech config, give us some information, then create a location where we're going to dump those files out to, because this is always going to write something to a file that exists somewhere on disk, and you then have to put that somewhere. We give it some text we want it to read, or sorry, want it to generate audio for, and then we create an audio config, a WAV file output. We then create a speech synthesizer for that WAV file. We then get it to speak the text, and then we just wait until that's complete. So let's run this bit of code. This has generated me a file here. So I asked it to say, hello, melb.net. This is AI Aaron speaking to you, and I hope you are having a good time tonight and have learnt that I can't use the side scroll on my laptop. No, learned some new stuff. I wish I could attend in person, but as I'm not a person, it would not really be possible. So let's see how that sounds.
Hello, Melby. This is AI Aaron speaking to you, and I hope that you have been having a good time tonight and have learned some new stuff. I wish I could attend in person, but as I am not a person, that would not really be possible.
So you can see how there's things that it struggled a little bit with. Melby.net. Okay, it stumbled over that. But like a lot of the words, like they were pronounced correctly. They were pronounced in mostly Australian English. My name, when I use with American models, it's always Aaron. No, it's A's, not E's. Not Aaron, I'm Aaron. Hard A's, not soft A's. But otherwise, like it's very realistic, very passable in terms of an AI assistant. And it's the kind of thing that could be very useful in an application where you're wanting to have more of a like an interaction that is like in a personality or a representation of a person at your organization, or a fake personality that you've created about your organization. Obviously, there are a bunch of ethical concerns and stuff like that that you've got to weigh up the value of doing like a truly custom voice trained on someone. But it's the kind of thing that is definitely possible. Okay, we're coming towards the end of time. So we're going to power on because I've still got another talk to give today. Yeah, you're not escaping just yet. So I want to talk about how we address the model knowledge gap. I nearly updated to this, like, where is Kate Middleton? I was really tempted to do that during this week, but I wasn't actually sure what to put in the completion prompt. See if the model knows. I've also spent way too much time reading that stuff online. It's weird. Anyway, models don't have training data, training cutoff points. So if we ask the question, is Queen Elizabeth II still alive? Depending which model you're using, a GPT-4 model or a GPT-3.5 model, you're going to get a different answer. Ideally, we want the answer to come back saying, as per my last update, she was still alive, but that data might be out of date, because the model may not know the answer, and we want it to be able to give us that answer. So this is where you need to have a system prompt that is, if you don't know the answer, state to that effect. If you put the temperature really close to 0, and maybe even the p top really close to 0, you're likely to just have it go give whatever answer I think is correct based off its training data. GPT-3.5 will go, yes, she's still alive. Like, it's because she's a reptile person. But the other problem with the knowledge gap is that it doesn't understand your organization. Let's say that you're running an online outdoors retailer, maybe called Kintoso. I don't know. And you have an AI system where someone comes in and asks, I need warm waterproof socks to go on a hike. Sure, I can help with that. Here's a product that could be useful for you. What if you don't stock that product? Well, the model doesn't know that. It's just going, well, this is a waterproof shoe. Well, that shoe may no longer exist because it was trained on data from 2021 and it's 2024. So that information is no longer valid. So how do we address that? Well, we can add knowledge to our prompt. We saw that with adding the knowledge around the .NET 8 release. So in this case, we create a meta prompt where we give it our task, the thing that it's capable of doing, the system message essentially, and then we give it some documents. The models don't understand things like Markdown, but they don't understand like headings and things like that. They just look at it as text, but they do understand things like Markdown to suggest emphasis. So we'll see that like these things are probably slightly differently weighted in terms of how to read that text. So these documents, so some example of shoes, and again, we get that prompt, I need warm waterproof shoes to go on a hike, and the model comes back and says, sure, I'd be happy based off of the information available. Here's a shoe, possibly even a link to the product page where someone can go buy that and continue on their checkout journey. But that starts becoming a problem when you've got more and more data inside of your system. Like, models can only take so many tokens. You can only give it so much before you just can't add more knowledge to it, unless you're using something like Gemini, which is what, like 1 million tokens now, and you basically upload War and Peace to it. But really, like tokens are how we do pricing of models as well. So the more tokens you give it, the more expensive it's going to be to work with the model. So instead, we would look at a pattern like the retrieval augmented generation pattern, or RAG for short. So in this case, we take our user question, so the prompt the user has come in. We would do some kind of a query over a knowledge base. This could be a traditional search engine. It could be a vector database where we're doing a semantic search. That's how the HanselBot works, is that it goes to a vector database and does a similarity search, and then only pulls back the results that are semantically similar or keyword search similar to the question the user has asked, and attach those to the meta prompt that we give to our LLM. So basically, instead of giving it all of our information, we're giving it the constrained information that is only important for that point in time. Then we get our pass this across, we get our results back, we then get our completion back from our model in the way that we want it. So we've got about 2 minutes left, and I probably need to refill my water and have a drink and rest my voice for 30 seconds. So I'll skip the second part of the demo where basically we dive into that application. Also, because the code base for the Hanselminute bot is available on GitHub, github.com/AaronPowell/HanselMinutesBot. You can go and have a look through it. And you can run it locally. It uses .NET Aspire. Hit F5, kick off the ingestion pipeline. It will then download all 900 odd or 1,000. I'm not quite sure what the episode counter is up to. It will download all the episode descriptions, and it will just start slamming an LLM to generate embeddings, to store in a vector database, and then you can start querying against it. It takes about 5 hours to generate a data set for you, but it definitely can be run entirely locally. In fact, it's just running on my laptop, except for the LLM that's running in Azure. But I'll leave 1 minute and 4 seconds for questions. But thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for listening to me for 45 minutes talk about AI assistants and AI and stuff like that. I think this stuff is really cool. And like, it is so easy to integrate these into .NET applications. Yeah, thank you.
Break, and then there's some, I think there's some software for some drinks and then a part break, and then we'll come back for part 2 in about 10 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, I've been playing with the. Like at the beginning, I thought it's useless because you can use it to the API, and then I realized that doesn't say the story. You need to properly save the story. So, but yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, so semantic kernel is like, it's a level up from like where this demo is at. I'm actually building a new version of the sample application for this using semantic kernel to be able to demo that off. It's really good from an abstraction point. So you can swap between different models if you want to test out like a local model versus like a hosted model. It's also got a bunch of built-in stuff around generating complex workflows. That's where I'm really interested in. Like, how do you ask a question that is kind of multi-part and you need to do a few things to get the final answer?
Like the planning,
yeah, the planner stuff. Like that's fundamentally the same way. So images are a little bit tricky because it basically throws a whole bunch of noise on it to make it like a noise-filled one, and then tries to work backwards to figure out how to get back to Just waiting for the producers up the back. I
Okay, we're good to go.
think George is saying yes, we're good to go.
All right. So, what's the rules for this one, Aaron?
There are no rules. I said that I was happy to give a bit of a preview of the talk I'm giving tomorrow at DD Melbourne about burnout. But I want this to be a bit more of a conversational discussion about the topic of burnout and mental health in the tech industry. It's something that I don't think we talk about enough. And like as someone who's lucky enough to be in a position that I can speak at events and things like that, I want to use my platform to try and foster that dialogue because I think it's a very important topic. So I put together this talk. There's going to be a mic running around if anyone has questions, things like that. I'm going to jump around through some slides as well, but I prefer not to talk for another 45 minutes. You'd probably also prefer not to listen to me talk to a set of slides for another 45 minutes. That's a lot, Aaron. And like the fact that there's this many people still here on a Friday night, I'm suitably impressed. But so I titled this talk, I burnt out, now what? And the reason I did that, well, let's skip the slide deck. I probably don't need to introduce myself or anything like that. But the reason that I wrote this talk was at the start of 2023, I wrote this blog post. There's a QR code. You can scan that if you want to read it yourself in your own time. But I was burnt out. And I decided to write this post mostly for myself. Like I sat down after the Christmas holidays. I had that week or so off that we get around that Christmas time when I was really working. I came back to work and I sat down and I just wrote the post. I didn't discuss it with my manager or anything like that. I hit publish, and the first time basically anyone heard about it that I worked with was when it got syndicated through my RSS feed and it auto tweets. My RSS feed automatically tweet. Well, it did before Twitter did a Twitter. So it automatically got posted to social media. I did that. But it definitely came as a bit of a shock to like a lot of people that I was working with. And this is where I'm going to jump through slides. But before we talk, I guess, specifically about burnout, I want to talk a bit about mental health. I grew up as a kid in the 90s. I don't think I'm dating myself looking at the age of some of the people in here. I think I'm hearing chuckles on the back, so I know I'm not dating myself. But like anyone that kind of grew up like in this generation, like mental health wasn't really the sort of thing that we talked a whole lot about. My parents were both from rural Australia. Mum's side's farmers, gone back multiple generations farmers. My dad's side's from like an equally rural part of Australia, and like mental health discussions are even less common in those sorts of communities. You kind of just like deal with it, particularly farming communities. Just like kind of deal with your stuff. But I guess the kind of thing that's hard. It was hard to grow up with that kind of a challenge because I was always really a shy kid, and I'm a parent of two young boys. I got a 6 and 8 year old, and I look at my childhood through the lens of the parents and the kind of experiences they're having and the experience that I had as a child, and everyone just said that I was shy, but realistically, I probably had some pretty severe social anxieties. I was the kid that would hide in the back of the classroom because I did not want to ask a question. I didn't want to answer anything. I didn't want to be part of a group assignment or assigned anything. I just let me sit there and hide and wait for the end of year 12. And also, mental health challenges are big in our family. My sister's bipolar. She's a younger sister, and I remember like in her mid-teens was when it started to manifest as it was first diagnosed as depression, then manic depressive, and then eventually after about 10 years she was diagnosed as bipolar. So I've had calls about suicide attempts, substance addiction, all that sort of stuff, but we just didn't talk about it as a family. My parents did everything they could to shield me from it. I remember once I was at the hospital, my sister had another suicide attempt, and I was sitting there like by her bedside, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to burden you or anything like that." And I'm like, I know what you're going through. And she's like, how do you know? Like, how do you know that? I'm like, well, how do I not know? And she didn't realize that like, despite the fact that my parents had done everything they could to try and pretend that it wasn't happening, like I was still aware what was going on, but we just didn't talk about it. Again, that's why I say I want to use my platform as someone who is fortunate enough to be able to be in front of people and confident enough to speak to talk about these sorts of things. But like being a shy kid, everyone just assumed I was like that quiet stoic. You know, I'd always get my homework done, my assignments were in on time. I wasn't a great student, I was like B average, I think. Like, but I remember in year 12 coming up to exam times, and my mum was like, "Oh, you'll be fine. I don't think you even have the capability of getting stressed." And the analogy of a duck swimming across a pond was like, I think that's the perfect analogy to what I was feeling. What I feel a lot of the time is that I might look calm and collected, and you know, that duck just gracefully swimming through the water, but underneath, like, its feet are going a million miles an hour. There's chaos down there, and like internally, that's what I've often had to deal with is trying to work out, you know, how do I navigate my own mental health, my own challenges I'm having at work, and that sort of stuff. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and I grew up in Melbourne. I actually I spent the first 5 years of my working career in Melbourne. I moved to Sydney in 15 years ago, I think it was. And is it like, and like if I look at my life and my career that I've had as an adult, as an outsider, it seems like I've kind of had it. I don't want to like sound arrogant or anything, but I seem like I've had a very successful life. This weekend at DDD Melbourne will be the 10th time I've spoken at DDD Melbourne. They've run 11 events, and I've spoken at 10 of them. And it's only because I didn't submit one year, and that was because there was scheduled to be on the same weekend as my first child was to be born. And I figured I probably should actually be there for that. He came a week early, so I probably could have done both. But for the sake of my marriage, it's probably better I was in Melbourne. I was in Sydney. I've been fortunate enough to be invited to speak at conferences around the globe and around Australia. After the first DD in Melbourne, I met another Sydney-sider. I came down for the first DD in Melbourne. I met another Sydney-sider there, and we went back and we started DDD Sydney. We ran that for a bunch of years. I've spoken at DDDs all around the country. I've done every single DDD in Australia. Speaking at DDD Melbourne was what got me invited to apply and eventually get hired at Redify, which I considered the best .NET consulting company at the time. I'm sorry to the SSW folks in the room. That's why I clarified with at the time. So like, I got awarded a Microsoft MVP, like all these sort of things that sound really exciting. Like and like I said, as an outsider that would look at my career, like I've had all these successes, but you don't see the failures. I've applied at Microsoft 4 times. I only got the 4th one. I flamed out fantastically from technical interviews at Microsoft. Like, I didn't even get through the first round of loops. And these were interviews that I'd been invited to by friends that I had working at Microsoft. Talk about a humbling thing when you've got people that are like, this is a good guy, you should hire him. And you just crash and burn in a technical interview because you think you're going in there as hot shit. It turns out you're not. I got offered a job at a startup in Australia. And they were pre-IPO at that point, and I turned it down because I didn't think that they were going to be as successful as they are, and I think their stock price is now worth like a couple $100. And I was offered a stock portfolio at cents, and things like that. The things you don't see about someone's career. But I did eventually join Microsoft. I joined Microsoft in the role that I'm in now, which is developer advocacy, and it was my dream role. I love being at conferences. I love public speaking. I love sharing the things that I know and that I learn about. And I also love learning from people like yourselves in the room, the things that you're building, the things that you're tackling, the problems that you're solving. And that helps me become a better developer because that's the sort of stuff that I love to learn about and share and all that kind of stuff. And I've just ticked over 5 years at Microsoft. My goal was to work at Microsoft. I first applied in like 2013. And it took me 6 years to finally get a job there. And then I burn out. So I started Microsoft at the start of 2019, and like, yes, we had COVID through 2020 and 2021 and 2022, and I think a lot of people's mental health took a hit in that point, but I think I weathered it a lot better than a lot of people that I know. At least, again, looking outwardly at other people, I think I weathered it pretty well. I said I've seen a lot of mental health challenges through my sister and my family, and arguably some of the things to not do in that regards. Being in the tech industry, you meet a lot of people that have gone through similar life experiences. So, and I was working for a team in the US, so this idea of remote working wasn't exactly a bothersome one for me. I was already remote working when COVID hit at Microsoft, and the really only change was that I wasn't traveling all that frequently, which my wife really appreciated. We had two really young kids at that point in time. But in the middle of 2022 is when I think it hit me the hardest. I was 3.5 years into Microsoft. I was just onboarding my 8th manager. It's the 8th manager that I'd personally had in 3.5 years. And that was hard. I remember like getting the notice that I was like, we were going to have a new manager of the team, and it's just like, again. In the middle of that year, when my outgoing manager, who had only been with us for 6 months, I'd helped onboard them. They were new to the company. We were doing our end of year review with them and our new incoming manager, and I think now looking back, I was already somewhat checked out at that point. I got praises from my outgoing manager for helping onboard them and getting them settled in the company, and as the manager of the team and stuff like that. And my new manager was based in France. Anyone that works with colleagues in Europe knows, like, Australia and Europe are just not compatible time zones in the slightest. All my other managers have been in the US, which is not great, but it's better than Europe. So like they were never online when I was online, and vice versa. So it was hard, and the feedback that I got was that I was the most senior person in the team. I needed to start stepping up, because if I didn't, I was staring down the barrel of a performance improvement plan, or a PIP. You'd think that'd be a wake-up call, but it wasn't. All right, cool. Mumbled something to the effect of, yeah, okay, cool. We'll keep going. I'll find some things to do, and we'll tackle it. Because like I was just working in a fog at this point. Just as the weeks rolled by, I was just more and more checked out. Like I'd get up, I'd sit at my computer, and I'd just like stare at the screen for hours on end. Scroll social media. Twitter was nowhere near the dumpster fire that it is today. It was a dumpster fire, but it's more a trash can fire at that point. Now it's just like a big flaming dumpster. And there are weeks I can't account for. I have no idea what I was doing, day in, day out, just sitting at my desk. And like I didn't know what to do. Like it's just like it still really wasn't that much of a wake up call. I just kind of, I think I'd resided to the fact that I'd had a goal setting exercise with my manager, and and I jokingly said to them, like, it was where you make a joke and you both got to go, like, it's kind of a joke, I guess. When I was like, yeah, look, we'll revisit this in 5 months, because like that's when I get a new manager. Because I looked at the stats, like I was averaging a manager every 5 months. Like, I didn't care. Like I'd done this that many times. Like whatever, let's just roll on through. I went on holidays. We did a family holiday. Went up the coast with my wife and kids, her parents, her aunt and uncle, her cousin, her cousin's husband, and their kid. And we had a couple of apartments. We were just by the beach, and turned all the work stuff off on my phone. I took my laptop because I think at that point it was a safety blanket anyway. Like the idea of not having a computer with me was just weird. I've been nearly 20 years in tech, and like the idea of just not having a computer near me is just, it's foreign. I've seen a lot of people nodding, like, you know what I mean, right? Even if I'm not going to use it, like I probably told myself that maybe I'll be inspired to code. And I hadn't coded in weeks at this point. Like maybe I'll be inspired. we got back from that week away, and I realized that I hadn't touched a computer in a week. And that was probably the longest time that I hadn't gone without using a computer. And I realized that I didn't care. That was the first time I was like, okay, there's definitely something going on. I need to, I think I am burnt out because I grew up with technology. I got my first computer. It was a 386-66DX with a 5.5 and a 3.25 inch floppy drive in it. We were measuring our disk size in like megabytes. Like I've been old school computer. I've been around them for so long, and just this idea of like, I just didn't care that I had no desire to use a computer, and that's where I realized that there was something wrong. I knew I had to reach out. I had to reach out to someone for help. I talked to my wife about this, but I needed to do something about work. I've been really struggling to build a rapport with my new manager. Just like the time zones just made it almost impossible. So I went to my skip, so my manager's manager, because they were actually the previous manager I had. It's all very, very convoluted, but yeah. They were the manager that I'd helped on board, and I obviously worked with them for 6 months, and I had a reasonably good working relationship with them. I reached out to them and set up a one-on-one in December that year, and it was probably the most nervous I'd ever been going into a one-on-one. And I'd been a manager at Microsoft as well for a brief stint, and I'd had to deliver a PIP to someone, like a performance improvement plan, and ultimately we ended up managing that person out of the company. Like I'd had to be that manager. Like that's hard, but this was 1,000 times harder because it was me this time. I was the one that needed to be vulnerable, and we chatted some pleasantries about what had been happening over the last couple of months and something, and I just decided to bite the bullet. I just said, look, I'm burnt out. Like I'm really struggling here. I don't know what to do. And they were really empathetic. They've been through burnout themselves. So we talked for a bit about what could be next, and all that sort of stuff to just try and understand, because they wanted to understand a bit more about my personal experience, where I was coming from this. But ultimately, I felt so much lighter for having admitted that I was burnt out in a work setting. But then comes the question, well now what? Like, what do you do then? I've been to plenty of conferences where we've had talks about burnout, but it's always like, how do you identify that someone might be coming up to burnout? How do you help them not get burnt out? Too late. Like, I'm there. What do you do now? And this was the thing, I didn't know. I didn't have that answer. And this was the kind of the thing that we needed to work through, me and my skip, to work out where to go next and what to tackle here. So who's experienced burnout? Who's been through burnout? If anyone wants to share any of their experience, feel free. Down the back. I say wait till the microphone gets run as well.
So, hey, Aaron, good to see you here. I was actually hoping to hear this talk during DDD, but you're doing a preview, so I thought, why not do it now?
And trust me, I've skipped over a huge chunk of it.
Yeah, so I like to share my burnout story. So I was in Berlin for 3 years. I was doing a startup with some friends, and I poured my heart and soul into this startup because just to give a quick background, I was in investment banking in London for 13, 15 years. I was helping the fat cats get fatter, and I've gone through like 2 kind of financial crises, and towards the end of my stint, I realized I was just a cog in this machine that was just making the rich richer, but I was also realizing that the sort of the negative impact it was having on kind of people's lives that had nothing to do with the financial industry, but because you go through a crisis and it affects global economies and people lose their jobs and so on. So that was starting to have a moral effect on me. So when I got this offer to go to Berlin to a startup, I thought, wow, I'm going to be doing like educational apps in German, and I don't know German, and I don't know the culture, and I don't know anything. But I love the challenge, and I put my heart and soul into this for like 3 years. And when that wasn't kind of it, and for 3 years we didn't really achieve where we wanted to go. And I think I reached that point where I think some of my founders had already actually burnt out before I did, but I kind of kept going, and I was pretty much the last person there to burn out. And yeah, it's it's I guess how I dealt with it was, I was in Berlin, so I basically thought, what, F this, I'm just going to go partying for a month. So that's what I did. I don't recommend that route, by the way. But I think, once, I think, you need some time to kind of just do whatever you need to do. Just not think about work or whatever that's caused burnt out. And I think once you've you've kind of need to hit rock bottom, I think, in some ways, which is what burnout does. But then I think once you do, I think, I think it's good to kind of reflect on it. I think I didn't really have anyone to talk to. And now looking back, I think I wish I had, people I could kind of speak to. I think that would have helped me tremendously. But I think being in Berlin and being some of my closest friends were already going through burnout. So it was, I didn't felt like it was maybe okay I didn't feel comfortable in turning to them and kind of discussing what, I was going through. But I think, like, I guess one of the great things about what COVID has done is, it's kind of put, mental health to the forefront. But I think to especially, people in Melbourne and Victoria, I think, you guys have gone through a lot more than you guys have gone through, what I would consider like a COVID burnout of sorts. So I think, once you hit some sort of like kind of some sort of like personal hardship, I think, I think the empathy for kind of like dealing with burnout and stuff has improved tremendously. I think, being living in Australia, and I think sometimes being an Australian man is being hard, whether you're born here or you're immigrant or whatever. There's a certain macho image that Australian men feel like they have to kind of live up to, and then they kind of struggle with that, right? So Australia, I think we have one of the highest suicide rates in the world, in the West. I believe so. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's not. So I know, yeah. So I think just going back to what I was saying. So I think yeah, it was tough, but I think I was possibly one of the few people I know that went through burnout, and I kind of went out of it relatively quickly. I think, I guess, I think some of the things I could, recommend also is, like acknowledge that it's okay to kind of sometimes fail and you hit rock bottom, but you've got the whole your whole life and your whole future to kind of look forward to. So just learn this as a stepping like a stepping stone, and kind of move. I think you will I think everyone can find kind of like the resilience in them, or build the resilience that they need to like get through it. And if you're struggling, it's okay. You can turn to people. I think these days now, like, you don't even have to turn to friends or family. Sometimes you can turn to strangers, and you'll be surprised. But I guess the key thing is, if you don't ask or if you don't talk, then you're not going to get the help that you're looking for. So I think, don't be afraid. I think this is the one time in your life you cannot be afraid. If you can't do it for yourself, then do it for your family, or do it for your loved ones, or do it for people that care about you, because they will definitely want to help you, and they will definitely want you to kind of pull through. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Something that I found by writing this blog post, and I'm someone who loves to write. I've been blogging since 2008. There's over 550 articles up on my website. And I was looking back at the stats while I was putting together this talk, and I've had no less, the lowest number of articles I put out in a year was 11. So I've always hit at least 11 articles a year for the last 16 years. Like I've been reasonably consistent in that. But I hadn't been writing in the few months leading up to when I was like essentially at that rock bottom point, and it was a realization to me that it was something that I was missing in my life. Like I'd love to do it. I'm a pretty terrible speller, and I'm pretty terrible at reading. Anyone who reads my articles will attest to the fact that I have some unique grammar in there. But I do really enjoy telling a story. I will waffle on for as long as you like. Like that. How long have I been speaking for today? It's been well over an hour, and I'm quite content to just like waffle on, tell a story. And that was part of why I wrote this, is because I just had to get down. I had to just sit down and write. But the really humbling thing about doing this is the number of people who reached out on through slid into my DMs to tell me their story, or ping me on Teams at work. I had some very senior people at work reach out to me to let me know that they'd read, they empathized, and was there anything they could do to help. One of my friends from Melbourne that I hadn't spoken to in a couple of months, just you kind of have those friends that you don't speak to all that frequently, but still one of your best mates. He called me up because he'd seen the article get going around, and he wanted to check on me, see how I was doing. But it was it was really humbling to have people maybe see that I was confident enough to put this out, that they felt that they could also reach out and share their experience, or tell me something that they may have been afraid to speak out about up until that point. One of the things for me that helped me out of burnout was I was working in the JavaScript advocacy team at Microsoft, and I said to my skip that I wanted to move teams. No slight on JavaScript developers to anyone that's in the room that is a JavaScript developer, but I realized I needed to get out of that space. I felt that I wasn't able to do anything more with inside of advocacy at Microsoft focusing on JavaScript. So I asked to move to the .NET advocacy team, which is where I am today. And I got a call from our GM. So that was my manager's manager, so 3 levels above me. After I put in the request, and they read the blog post, and they said, "Are you sure? Your request is that you want to move teams." And I talk about it in the article that like one of the things that led to my burnout was the constant managerial change. And my GM said to me, "Just so I understand that you've talked about a contributing factor to your burnout was constant managerial change, and you want managerial change." I asked AI to generate me an image of to sticking to your guns, and this is what it came up with, and I just had to put it in the deck because I'm like, that's so cool. I have no idea. Like, what? Like, why is there a pirate ship? Back on topic. I said to our GM, I'm like, "Yep, I want to move teams." And I'd actually anticipated this question coming. Knowing what I'd written and knowing the ask that I put forward, and I was very adamant that yep, that was what I was wanting to do. I was wanting to move to a different team because the only person that can truly know how to help you move forward when you experience burnout is yourself. And my managers were asking all the right questions to make sure that I was thinking through the decisions that I was putting forward. I got asked, like, should I look for a role elsewhere within inside of Microsoft? I talked about some of like my big career goals that I had with my skip, like when they were my manager. So they knew what I was ultimately hoping to achieve at Microsoft. They're like, well, is it time to start executing on that part of the plan? Like, do we look to move you? Do we look for roles outside of advocacy? Would that be a contributing factor? And I was my answer was no. I really wanted to get back into the .NET space. I really wanted to get to do advocacy around .NET, because that was .NET was where I started my career, and it's where I felt the next phase of it was going to be. And I got approved for the transfer. So I moved to the .NET team, where I've been for the last 12 odd months, and I've still got. Up until like 3 weeks ago, I still had the same skip, and then they got reorged to a different one because it was about time for a new manager. But I've had the same manager in the .NET team for it's like 14 months now, and I'm looking forward to when they. I keep joking to them and saying, like, steady day now. No, we've actually been pretty stable for a while now, which is quite a nice change. That's it, right? I'm cured. But it's done. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. There are still days where I find myself just sitting at my desk and just kind of zoning out, ignoring the work that's piling up in my backlog of stuff. But that's part of the human condition, right? We all have days where you're just like, fuck it. Gonna just watch an extra YouTube video at lunchtime. Like, you just need you need that bit of chill time. But I think that the difference now is that I'm more self-aware of that as a behavior and what might be the triggering aspects to it. I've talked about my boss with this a number of times, and particularly when projects that I've been working on haven't been moving at the pace that I maybe was hoping they'd move at or anything like that. I've been feeling more confident that we're able to pivot, so we're not like locked into maybe next week we'll be able to tackle that, or the week after, and then it's 4 weeks later, it's 6 weeks, it's 8 weeks later, and we still haven't been able to get any traction. Pivoting early, be able to avoid situations where it just feels like I'm being unproductive, because that was another really contributing factor. I just didn't feel like I was able to achieve anything. So being able to identify that early, and a lot of this is having burnt out. I can now see those aspects of my personality. I can see when they're coming up and things like that. In the middle of last year, I had end of year review with my new manager, the newest of my managers, the one I still have today. And this was 12 months from when I realized I was first really starting to burn out. And I went into it with a bit of trepidation, because I felt like I was doing a lot better. I felt like I was able to contribute. I was achieving some of the goals that we'd set out. And I was having weekly one-on-ones with my boss, and I was getting that positive reinforcement and things like that along the way. So I felt like I was doing it. But this was going to be a holistic look over the past 12 months. Feedback from HR, from other sibling teams that we work with and stuff like that. So while I went in it, like I said, I felt like I should be okay, but I didn't ultimately know. And basically the feedback was that if looking at the year as a whole, it was kind of like it was like if I hadn't have done something kind of December, January, I'd have been on a PIP. And a PIP, you either successfully come out of it and you can keep having a career, or you get managed out of the company. Like it's kind of one of the two ways that it goes. And like I was very close to ending up on one of those. But if you just looked at the 6 months after that in isolation, it was like night and day. And that was really it was really positive to hear that. So it was really validating to hear that. Not just because I I thought I was doing a good job, but to get that feedback from the sibling teams that we're working with, from HR, that it wasn't something that they would need to consider for me going forward, at least not yet. There's still time. I've got a lot of working years ahead of me, but it was very validating to see that the work that I'd done and the progress that I'd made was being reflected in that. So I was very happy as a result of that, and I'm very keen to see what the rest of this year looks and what goes forward from this. But I think we'll wrap it up there, because it's getting late into the evening. It's still 8 o'clock. But I'll leave with this remark: like, ultimately, I just try and make each day a little bit better than the last. Yes, there are days where things are going to suck. Things aren't working out the way that you want to. You feel like I feel like that I'm not making progress that I want, and I need to. We need to work through those. We need to find those things that are going to make it. The overwhelming positive, the overarching narrative of the time period that we're looking at is going to be a positive one, and we just make the days that do suck, accept them, but accept them for what they are. Learn from them, build on them, work out how to make them not become the norm, because that, for me, was what resulted in burnout. I can't tell anyone how their journey is going to go. All I can do is share my journey with you. And I think the more that we tell our stories, the more we tell our experiences, the more we're going to help everyone else that we work with, whether it's our direct peers, newcomers to the industry, or people that have been around for decades like myself. Thank you for listening, talking about burnout, sharing my journey, and having other people share their journey as well. I think it's a topic that we need to talk more about. Yeah. Got the microphone down the back.
I just wanted to add something. Thanks very much for your talk. That was fantastic. Give me a round of applause. Go for it. That was great. Yeah. One thing I just wanted to briefly mention was definitely see a psychologist. I've seen a bunch of psychologists over the last, 10, 20 years, and they're awesome. They know so much stuff. They're professionals in all of this. You can go to your doctor and you can they put you on a thing called a mental health plan, but it just means you can see psychologists for cheap. I think in Victoria, you can get like 6 or 10 visits in a year or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, covered by Medicare. It's really cheap, and they can be extremely helpful, and they're professionals. They really, really know their stuff. So I can definitely recommend them as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Oh, yeah.
JK's got his hand up.
I'll try to be brief on that. I kind of experienced the fog as well, and I did experience kind of what might happen afterwards. And in my case, for instance, I got from one project to another, and what happened was I got to be tech lead. So you need to go from one sprint to another. You see the project not being in the best state, and I went from not being able to output as much as I could every day to just going to 110, 150% every single day, and going from not being able to work properly to unable to shut down. So yeah, when you see that you have issues with the burnout, you don't want to be in the state where it just flips the switch and you have the opposite problem.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope we have some time for another question. So I haven't been through burnout, but is there anything that you noticed through this journey, that things that don't work contrary to popular beliefs? So you found the things that works for you, but have you seen something that you thought that it would work, but it actually didn't, or it make worse, or it doesn't impact as much?
Look, I would say that I'm probably somewhat lucky in that moving teams did actually work for me. And I only made a fairly small move in the scale of Microsoft. Like I'm still essentially doing the same job I was doing. I'm just focusing on .NET rather than focusing on JavaScript. And that was it was a fairly risky move because like not a whole lot changed about what I do. And this was part of the reason why my manager chain was very much wanting to go through that thought exercise with me of like, is this going to be enough of a change for you? And so I think that's the kind of thing that could very easily backfire for someone. Just like going to a different team within inside of your organization may not be the right one for you, because at the end of the day, a lot of organizations deliver on the exact same sort of thing. Particularly if you're working for more like an ISV or a company that's delivering software solutions compared to say a consultancy, you're going to have a lot of very similar work. I think if I was still in consulting, I probably would have had a very different outcome. I probably wouldn't have been able to just like jump to a different project and had the same level of success isn't the right word, but the same level of positive outcome that I've managed to achieve here. So yeah, I know it's not exactly an answer to your question, but I think it was more of a flip on that of like where I think things that have worked for me that I don't think are necessarily going to be the right one for everyone.
I think at this one.
Yep.
It kind of depends on what the triggers are. I think you mentioned triggers before, and that actually triggered. I think there's no point going from like A to B if B situation B has the same triggers that cause that you to burn out in the first place. So I think you kind of need to identify what's really causing this, and I think you also mentioned like going to a new environment. I think that helped for me. So for me, I actually not long after I recovered from burnout, I was actually looking to leave Berlin because I realized there were so many things like associated with Berlin that was emotionally kind of triggering this kind of sensation of burnout. So I think once I've kind of left Berlin and I was in another country, I got my mojo back in a sense. I got my energy back, and I was looking for my next passion project. So I think so you kind of need to identify, is it your workplace, is it a person, is it like a certain aspects of your like personal life or your work life, is it the company culture? And I think depending on once you kind of realize what the triggers are, I think then you can probably take appropriate action. Hopefully you're in a position to be able to take an appropriate action against it. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Cool. Well, Aaron, thank you very, very much for your talks.
End feed.
It was a great night with all the knowledge from the first talk, and then the second one is, I think we need more of these. Very, very useful. There's a lot of words I can probably add to that, but yeah, no. Thanks once again, everyone. Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, we'll just wrap it up there. It's home time and
to the pub.
Yep, to the pub, and also DDD tomorrow morning early. So thanks everyone for coming. That's it. Hey man.
Yep.
Why not?
Why
not?
not?
The longer arms than me. But... Hey, oh, that's all right. You got one, yeah.
So you know how you were complaining about the clicker?
Oh, wow.
It's a Microsoft MVP clicker. That's how long I've had it.
I had my first clicker for many years. And they didn't give me a dongle back.
Oh no.
The dongle went missing.
I think I might need to get some tape. Like the
that the dongle?
yeah, there's the dongle. It's
Ooh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, just the top pops off. Let me give